There you go. And I'm going to check that phone real quick just to make sure it's not one of you all. Yes. Uh-huh. Check this second email that I sent you, the one with the link to the recording from last Tuesday afternoon. There's a new link every time. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, that was Catherine telling me she couldn't find the link. And I am going to stop sharing real quick because I am sure Stephanie will send me the same thing. Okay, and there's Catherine coming in. There we go. I'm going to share my screen back again. Okay, there you are, Catherine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and begin. Thank you all very much. Wayne was saying he was going to get an F on his homework, and I was going to compliment all of you all because the entire class sent homework, which is good. And also all of you all made your own folders in Dropbox. So you automatically pass because of doing that. So it was really nice. So let me show you your homework assignments first, and let's talk about them. So Ed, you're first up.
Okay, yeah, I used the 14 to 35 and just to see how close I could get to it. And it was pretty surprising. I was close. I got closer than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Because it's 0.9 feet, right? Focusing distance?
I don't remember, but
pretty close.
Pretty close, yeah.
Which, you know, for a wide angle lens is nice in that respect. And also, since we're going to talk about bokeh, I'm going to point out the blurry background on all of your photographs. We're going to emphasize that. And then here's the same thing, same distance when Ed moves to f8. Now you can notice the background's getting a little bit clearer, as you all noticed in your homework. And then here is f22. And this is just a good thing to emphasize too, from my point of view, that your wide angle is also a macro lens. So it's not just the so-called as sold macro lenses, but your wide angle can be a really nice macro lens. Next one, Ed, here's your 100.
Yeah, this is a macro 100 f2.8. And yeah, it gets pretty close.
It gets really close. And look, you can even, in this point, I don't know if you all can see it, but I can. You can see the ridges in the inlay here. So you can actually see the ridges that are in there, and that's at 2.8. But you see that slight curve is already going out of focus. Was it hard to focus at 2.8, Ed?
No.
No.
No, it was pretty good. I used my phone.
Uh-huh.
And the phone app, and I was taking the pictures with my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, because the Canon's got a really cool phone app. They had an old one that didn't work that well, but the new one works really well. You can change the focus point, and you can actually change some of the settings on your phone, and it changes the camera.
Cool. And then
that way I'm not touching the camera.
Yeah, you're not touching the camera. And then you notice at f8, the sides are now a little bit more in focus. And then we come at f32 and the sides all over here, you can see all the, the details in the structure. So
I'm not sure why on the bottom bottom third is a little darker than the other ones. I'm not sure what caused that.
Could be just the light hitting the top of the statue.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
This is an elephant. This is
Yeah.
an elephant.
And then here's the same thing done with the 1 to 500 millimeter. And this is, you're at your angle. So we were looking at this right here, right, Ed?
Yes, exactly.
So now we got it moved slightly at an angle. You can see the 7.1, you can see the drop off. And then here's the 51 at an angle, f51, which is amazing that that lens goes to f51.
Yes.
But
yeah, I hadn't paid attention until
Yeah.
I did that. And I thought F51, I never heard of F50.
yeah, yeah. But it turns out that, if we're
Yeah.
doing something like this, then that f51 really comes in handy. And mathematically, we need that f51 if this is what we're going to do.
And these were at 500.
Uh-huh. And then here's flat to the film plane, exact same.
Right.
But you can see the beautiful bokeh back here, the blown out background at 7.1. And then 51, here it is. Look how much depth of field we've got, but still just a little bit of softness on the edges. Good job, Ed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Catherine, here's yours. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I started because I have a new Z5, and so I got the 24 to 200. So what I did is I did 24, and then later I did 200 of that lens.
Okay.
And so I got fairly close, but not that close on this one. And so tried to keep it in exactly the same spot, but to focus, I had to keep moving forward or backward.
And did you say Z or R? I thought you were
Z.
R.
I have
You're-
a Nikon.
You're a Nikon, so you're Z. I'm sorry,
Z5,
I'd put
yeah.
you down. I'd put you down as
Yeah.
okay. And then
And
you
so
got
this
what?
is so this was new. So I'm not sure I did it all exactly
Yeah.
right, but I kept moving the object because that's what I had to do to get it in focus.
Ah, now this is a 24 to 200 lens,
Right.
Nikon.
Right.
Okay. And then you kept having to move the object.
Mhm.
So that means as you're zooming, its minimum focus distance also changes.
Right.
So that's a structure of the lens.
Yeah. And I have to remember because I think as I got into it, because I had to do this about 3 or 4 times.
Uh-huh.
And so this last time I might have gotten to where I kept it in the same spot. I know I started that way.
Okay.
And then I thought, no, just keep it in the same spot and
Yeah.
see what happens. So I was challenged.
Okay. Okay. That's okay. Because this is what we're doing is we're learning our equipment and we're learning what it does. So here's your 24 f4, and you see what it's got a pretty nice bokeh on it back in here. So that's really nice. And then here you go when you get f8. And then once again, we're seeing much, much more of the background. And then here we go at f20. So now you're seeing much, much more of the background. But
Mhm.
notice that, and you'll see this in everybody's picture, the background never comes in close, sharp focus.
Right.
Because since it doesn't come in close, sharp focus, the background, then when we're focused to our minimum focusing distance. And then your 40 millimeter.
Now this is a DX lens,
Mm-hmm.
and then I bought the adapter for the
Okay.
mirrorless so that I
Uh-huh.
could, because I have this 40 millimeter and a 35 millimeter.
Uh-huh.
And so amazingly enough, and I don't know if it's just I've practiced, but once I got the Z camera, the new camera, and I even with the adapter and used this lens, was the first time I could get any clarity in the photographs. I had just about given up on this lens.
Huh.
And so anyway, so that was So I was pleased with what I've been able to do with
Yeah.
it now. And it
So
could
this-
just be I've practiced. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So this is a 40 millimeter fixed, right?
Yes.
Okay,
A
so
micro
no-
lens.
No
from
zoom.
Nikon.
Okay. And so at F3, you see we've got some little bit of the petals, and then F8, a little bit more depth of field coming into the interior of the flower. And then 25, I noticed that, notice how these get really grainy on everybody's once we get down into the 25 range, because it just means that we just don't have much light. But you see how much of the background is still really soft, even at F25.
Kathy,
Flower
one
looks
of the
good.
things I played with is because when I went to when I put them in Lightroom, I could see the noise in it.
Uh-huh.
And I think this was because I set it as aperture priority.
Uh-huh.
I didn't use manual.
Yeah.
So it was like at 12,800
Uh-huh.
on the
Mhm.
ISO. And so,
Yes.
and even when I went
Yes.
back and then I played around with that too, but I'm still learning the camera. So I never
Yeah.
could quite get it to do it in manual and stick
Yeah.
to a lower ISO.
Well, it won't be, even if you're in manual, it's going to be the same settings, whether you're in manual
Wow.
or aperture priority.
Well,
And
yeah.
because the aperture is so closed down, you're just going to get a lot of noise. And
Okay.
especially since we're doing this inside. And so we're all going to get a lot of noise at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's just a good thing to test out how much noise the camera has and what's
Mhm.
acceptable and that type of thing. So here's your 200. And is this a 200 fixed, or this is the other
No,
lens
this is
zoom?
the long end of that 24 to 200.
Okay. Very
So
good.
its lowest aperture is 6.3.
Okay. Is it a Nikon?
Yes.
Okay. It's a Nikon lens. Okay.
It's for the Z camera.
Uh-huh.
So it's
So
a
yeah, so it's a
Nikon
Z. Yeah.
AFS, I think they call
Okay.
it.
And then here's you've got some, good detail in here at your 6.3, but notice once again, what a pretty blown out background you get at that 200 millimeter. And then here you go at F8 and notice that much, much more of the flower, especially on the back of it, is in focus. So that F8 is almost what you need if you're going to photograph flowers of this dimension with that lens. And notice that your background's still nice and pretty pure with that bokeh. There you go. And then here's 36. Now we're seeing much more of it back in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went back, and after I finished doing the homework, I took a Coreopsis and did some photographs and did a black background
Uh-huh.
with a piece of foam core. But what I found is that the F8 seemed to be a sweet spot
Mhm. Mhm.
for getting it. It was, so
Yeah.
I had fun experimenting afterwards.
Good. You learned. Yeah. But at 200, that F8 really is. And, there was that old saying in photography years ago, F8 and be there, meaning just put the camera on F8 and shoot. Most stuff will be in focus. But at that 200 millimeters, yeah, F8's a really nice place to be, especially when you're focused as close as you can get.
And I was pretty close.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And then here's your 40 millimeter.
Mhm.
And then your,
This is when it was at an
40.
angle, when we weren't
Uh-huh.
at plane.
okay. Here's where you're turned. You're
Mhm.
turned here.
Well,
Yeah.
on all three of those.
All
I
three of
turned.
them we were turned. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And F32, but still notice how much of your background is out of focus. So good job. Very good job. Linda, you want to tell us about your cue ball or
So
your
as I
pool
said
table?
earlier, I was at my son's house, so I didn't have a lot of options that I do at home, but I picked a cue ball because I thought, you could see the number that way in focus. And, I just picked my three different lenses and hoped for the best. One question I did have was, I wasn't sure if we were supposed to do any cleanup in Lightroom, so I really didn't do much.
No.
I think
No.
on one of the cue balls, I got rid of that light spot,
Yeah.
but the rest of them, I just left it.
Yeah. They're not great photos. So it's, yeah,
Okay.
you didn't have to do any cleanup. It's okay.
Great.
Yeah.
And I was only about maybe 4 inches, and I left my
Mhm.
camera in the same place for each photo.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Nice controlled experiment then. So at 2.8, and if you look at the felt, you can see how much depth of field we have at 2.8 on this. And this is the 15 to 35 millimeter, Linda?
Yeah, and I kept it at 15.
Okay. And then you can notice, I was also noticing the roughness on the end of the pool stick. So
I have to laugh because my son came in and he said, Mom, he said, because I had another stick, and he said, the tip is gone on that one. You can't use that one. So I was like, well, I don't think anybody cares. But then it got me thinking. So I went back and redone it with the tip.
keep things right. Yeah. And then here's the 15 to 35, once again at f8. And you notice we got some nice depth of field, not a lot, but some nice depth of field. But then the background is still really pure. How far away is your background? Do you remember?
It was
Linda?
about 6 feet. Again,
Okay.
I had to eyeball it, but I think
Okay.
it was.
And then here you are at 22, and notice how much noise, because it's obviously getting much darker in here. But now you can see the edge of the table, and I can see the, whatever that's,
Right.
I guess that's leather or whatever that stuff is on there.
Fiber.
Yeah. Yeah. And then here you are at the 24 millimeter, and you angled the camera up and down,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you notice that here's your kind of depth of field right here, but it falls off pretty fast. And then here's your 24 millimeter flat to the film plane. And look at the background on this. So
Yeah.
this year 24 to 105, Linda?
It's a 24 to 70.
24 to 70. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you notice that background on there, really, really nice and pretty. And then here's angling up once again at the 24 f8, not flat to the film plane. And then 24 f8 straight across. So it's kind of interesting between these two.
Yes.
Yeah. And then here's f22, and you can see the fibers on the tip of the pool stick. And then not flat, so you're coming down, so it's intersecting it. Yeah. It's very pretty. And then here you are with your 100 millimeter,
Yes.
right? Yeah, and this is hard to focus in. It's on a round subject, so it's hard to focus, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know whether you should focus up here or right here or down here. So
Yeah, I tried to focus on the top of the 5.
Yeah. That's what it looks like right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then here's your f8, keeping it all stable. And we're seeing a little bit more of the 5, and not until we go to 32 do we get most of it. And you can see some of the nicks over in here.
Yeah.
I guess we use those as reference points. Yeah, the nicks are totally out of focus at 2.8. Yeah, and then 32.
Mhm.
So you see how once we get, you want to see that one more time, Ed? So
What's that?
here's, oh, I thought you were looking at the monitor up close. So the nicks on the cue ball.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah,
Yeah.
I noticed those when I looked at our pictures earlier.
Yeah. So, you see that when we get as close as we can get, then the depth of field just really compresses. And so we need to be real careful what f-stop we're using on these. Then
Oh.
Ed, here's your little Roadrunner. Paisano.
Yeah,
So-
that's
Yeah.
Wayne. Yeah. Yeah, I had a hard time trying to figure out what to photograph, and I started off with a hibiscus, and that wasn't working. So ended up with my little pet Roadrunner.
Exactly. And this is your 105 millimeter lens. So which one is this, Ed?
That's a 150 macro.
That's the 150 macro. Okay. So
Sigma, yeah.
yes. Yeah. So this is a Sigma lens, and this is an intentional advertised as a macro lens. And you
Right.
see at f4 really how shallow that depth of field is. How close does it focus, Wayne?
I was probably within about 3 to 4 inches.
Okay. Yeah. It's pretty small.
So, yeah, and not taking pictures inside or, like in studio, trying to figure out where to do it. Carpet on the floor. And so that had a little bit of instability, even just with a carpet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to work with that. And then the ball head that I have, I would get a little creep,
Uh-huh.
when I'd set it, well, then I'd have, after I would set it, turn loose of the knob, well, then it would, the focus would be just off a hair
Yeah.
from where I focused on. So,
And any ball head I've ever owned has done that. And it's just maddening when you start getting really, really macro stuff, because there's that little bit of creep. Yeah. Yeah. And then here you are at F8 and you're seeing that you're getting a little bit more. Before in F4, it was just the eye. So your focus is
well,
good.
see, I really wasn't
F8.
totally flat because in the F4, F2, the beak, the end of the beak was out of focus.
Yeah. But then notice at F22, now you finally got what looked like flat to the film plane. Now you finally got it all in focus.
Yeah.
But then we can see whatever's in the background there. I do like the little bit of fuzz on it too, because it becomes a reference point as you walk through this one, because you can see that little bit of fuzz on there. And then here's, go.
Gonna have to talk to my house cleaner about that.
Exactly. So your 183, which one is this?
That's a Tamron. That's one of my first, is I think it's 40 to 300.
Okay.
Got a little bit of a so-called macro effect to it, but that's what I ended up shooting at.
Yeah.
183.
That's good. That's good. And then F4, a little bit right there. It looks like your focus point's almost right here as above the eye. And then here you are at F8. Now notice that at F8, the whole little guy's in focus. So we've got sharpness all the way around, and your background is still pretty indistinct. So that looks good. And then your 36, now the background's competing. So I think that's a good illustration of what that lens does. And here you are at 300. Is this a 300 millimeter F4?
Yes.
Yeah. This is just a sweet, sweet lens. And then you notice that the background's got a nice purity to it. F4, still pretty narrow. And then here's your not flat to the film plane. Mr. Roadrunner looking away from us like he does out in the field. But it's still focused on the eye right there. Then got good detail right in here on his feathers. And then here it is at F8. But you notice that background starting to creep in just a bit, that detail in the background. And then here it is, not flat. I think this is a real good illustration of what really happens out in the field especially when we're photographing birds, how, that head we can get the eye in focus, but then the beak and the back are out of focus. And there you are at the 32, but that background's really competing now. Isn't it amazing how much of a difference that makes?
Yep.
And then here's your not flat to the film plane and almost have that beak and the back of the head in focus. But takes a pretty good bit when we're focused as close as we can. Anything on that one, Wayne?
Not really.
Lessons learned?
Well, yeah, that's, I think that's where the 6 foot background come into play, was what you can see how the f-stop affects the background.
Yeah. It's so important that we've got that distance between that and our subject. Yeah. And then this is Stephanie. She's not with us. So we'll go through these so that we can talk about hers and she can listen to the recording. So she's using a 70 millimeter at 2.8, and you can see that the focus is pretty good right here on the edge of this vase, and it's good right on the edges of the rows, but then kind of not quite here in the middle of it at her 2.8, but that at 8, seeing much more the edge of the vase right there, and then the edges of the rose, but still not quite as much, but we can see that stem. And then at 22, you can see now that we can get that edges of the rose are good. The edge of the vase is good. The edge of the stem is good. It's interesting. We still can't see quite down in there, but notice also the noise from that 22. And then here it is. This is her 90 millimeter 2.8. And this is, I think, not flat to the film plane because she's looking straight down at the rose. She's changed her angle. Yeah, and here's back at the same angle, the original angle, and going across. So very narrow depth of field at that 90 millimeter. And then here it is, f8, looking straight down into the rose. And f8, this one looks like we're a little bit more parallel to the rose. Here's the details right in here. And here it is, 90 millimeters, f32. So you see there's a fairly good amount of depth of field at f32 with this lens. I have this same vase and it reminded me that I never use it. So I might go dig it out and intentionally use it, or it just reminded me that, oh, I've got that same vase. I need that. Yeah. And then here it is, 90 millimeters at f32. And there's some pretty good detail on the edges of these rows of the rose right up in there. I like the lighting on this too, because that shows that there's a lot of stuff we could do with that one. And then here she is with her 200 millimeter 2.8, and a little bit of tiny focus, looks like it's almost right there on the edge of that rose. Very hard 3-dimensional subject to photograph. And here it is, f8, much, much better at f8. You see the difference between that 2.8 and that 8, just a whole lot better on the depth of field in there. And then here it is at 32. And once again, a lot of introduced noise simply because of photographing in the house. So good job on that one. Okay. I think she's using an LED light also, which I'll talk about probably when we're talking about lighting, because I can see it right in there. So she's used one of those GizTech LED lights. Some of you all might have used those in another class with me or out in the field with me. Okay, so questions?
Well, I just have a comment. I think what really stood out to me was the Roadrunner when the background changed, which planted a seed that I have to be very thoughtful about the background and the f-stop when I'm doing macro, because to me that got very distracting.
Yeah. And even though everything was sharp and tight.
Yes. It was like all I could see was that pattern in the back on that one photo.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. And that's just, that lesson we have to keep re-emphasizing to ourselves is watching what that background is doing and how distracting it is in the photograph.
Well, that's kind of the reason I picked an odd background like that, is so I could actually see what changes that it did make. So
yeah,
that was a good lesson.
Good lesson, isn't it? Yeah, just keeping track and knowing that we have to move around, the subject to keep that background. Yeah. Any other lessons learned on that one before we leave it? Good comment, Linda. Thanks. Nope, everybody's good. Okay, so Wayne, you're still with the digital SLR, at least until your 7 comes in. Be sure to watch those histograms. We still have to pay attention to the histogram. And in the mirrorless cameras, we can see when something's blown out of focus. We can see that it's pure white. So be sure to watch those histograms, because we go to all this effort to get close and get the right f-stop and get the focus. And then you look on the back of the camera and you realize that, okay, we've overexposed something. So, make sure that that exposure goes all the way across, even if it's just a small tail hitting the right side of the histogram. We don't care how many peaks and valleys a histogram has. We just want to make sure that we captured all of our tones. So if the histogram goes all the way across, it just means that we captured all of our tones. Mirrorless, you can look at the histogram inside your viewfinder. I just find it a little distracting to have one more thing in there, that one more object that I've got to look at. So I don't have my histogram turned on inside my viewfinder. But if it works for you, go ahead and do it, because we can, on mirrorless, we can look at the histogram while we're also underexposing or overexposing. So bokeh, I was pointing it out as we were going through all of those photos. And the bokeh, it comes from a Japanese word meaning blurry. The bokeh is the smoothness of the background, or the smoothness of the blur in the background. This all is based on the quality of the lens. The better your lens is, the smoother your background is going to be. And the higher, unfortunately, the higher quality your lens is, the more expensive your lens is, the smoother your background is going to be. So in photography, we really do get what we pay for. And when you're testing your lenses, you might notice that, oh, okay, that cheaper lens really doesn't have as pretty of a bokeh as the more expensive lens. And it's all based on how many sheets are in the aperture. So in a very cheap lens, the aperture would just have 5 sheets, 5 pieces of metal or plastic. In an expensive lens, it can have as many as 16 sheets. So the more sheets in the aperture that make that close up and open up, the purer your background is going to be. And so this one is a 24-105 by Canon, one of the professional level lenses. And you notice that my blown out background, my bokeh, is pure circles. And sometimes you will notice that you get a not rectangle, but you get an octagon back there, or you get a shape. And if you get an angular shape, that's showing you a little bit more of how many sheets you actually have in the aperture, and whether they are finely tuned to make a circle, or whether they're not finely tuned to make a pentagon or an octagon. So it all depends. Also, you all have already caught on distance from the subject. So the further your background is away from the subject, the better you're going to be able to blow it out of focus. The angle of the camera, and also the aperture opening. So when your aperture is really, really big, you're going to get really, really nice big blurred circles. But if you change your angle, then the bokeh also changes its shape. And you notice how here it changed into kind of eyeball shapes, especially right around the edge. In this middle, it's still circles, but toward the edge, it's turned into little kind of more squishy shapes. So just kind of an interesting little thing that happens with your bokeh is how the shapes change. So if you're playing with lights in the background, or anything that's glary in the background, just remember that as you change your angle, not flat to the film plane, as you change your angle, then your bokeh also changes. Interesting thing, isn't it? How that happens. So your bokeh in the background is all based on the quality of the lens, where you are, your angle of the lens. So this is the 24-105 f4 versus at 22. So that bokeh in your glare is going to be one shape, bokeh in your glare is going to be another shape. So just be aware of that this all is based on the lens, and it depends on the construction of the lens and the make of the lens. So sometimes in reviews of lens, you'll hear people talk about what a beautiful bokeh it has. And by the way, that is in the construction of things like Canon or Nikon's 50 millimeter top of the line. It's designed to have a beautiful, smooth, creamy bokeh. Same thing with like the 90 or the 100. It's designed to have that really, really smooth, perfect bokeh to it. Some of the studio lenses, the lenses that don't have zooms on them, are really designed to give those beautiful, beautiful backgrounds. The fixed lenses I find really hard to use because that means I have to walk up and walk back and walk up and walk back and move the subject and that type of stuff. I just like my zooms better. But this is all based on the construction of the lens. So here, for instance, is the 50 millimeter and that Canon makes. And you see back in the back of this chrysanthemum, you've got, you know, at f14, you can see how we've got some blurring going on back there in the back. But otherwise up here in the front, we've got this, you know, nice sharp type focus. But then when this lens goes to 4.5, you notice what happens to it. And then when it goes to 1.5, you notice what happens to it. And so it's a, you know, it's a lens with a really, really sweet bokeh, but at the same time, it's got a really shallow depth of field. And by the way, it is a lens I own, or I owned in my digital SLR days. I haven't repurchased it with my mirrorless, but it was a lens I didn't use very often, sat in the closet more than anything, more than any other lens I owned. Questions on that one? No. And then here's the 300 millimeter that Wayne was demonstrating. At one point, this was one of my favorite lenses. I'm waiting for them to make it again in the R series, but it is a really, really pretty lens. And this is, and it's an f4, so that means its minimum f-stop is f4, but this is at f29 and focused on this freesia in Costa Rica. But then here's what happens if we go to f4 or 5.6. So you see what a pretty background it has at 5.6, but then I lost this three-dimensional structure of this flower. So now the front petal's out of focus. The side even right there is out of focus. Go back to the 29 and you can see that we've got the detail in the flower, but we've got that background. So probably tells us that f8 is the sweet part on that one also when we're focused as close as we can. So some of these fixed lenses that are more telephoto, this one once again is a macro lens, so you can see that beautiful f4 background on it. But then this is the 100 to 500 or 100 to 400, and it's an f8 lens when you zoom all the way out. And you notice once again that beautiful background that it's got. So each one of your lenses has a different quality to that blown out background. And to me, this is why we should use them as tools and why we should understand what they do, because that's what we're trying to go for, is that beautiful, pure background as much as we can. Yeah. And here's the 100 to 400 again, done at f8 on a tree frog, Costa Rica. So you can see the depth of field kind of, you know, right in there. So those more telephoto lenses, we would definitely shoot those at f8. And same thing, even on wildflowers, f8. And your depth of field preview button. So on your digital SLR, it's right down here. On your mirrorless cameras, it's in the same spot. So this this depth of field preview button, we should be using it when we're doing our macro photography, because this will tell us what f-stop we should be using. If you push your depth of field preview button, it makes your picture go dark because the f-stop you're actually looking through the real f-stop. But you can now change your f-stop and watch it physically change. So this is where you can figure out, oh, do I need an f8 or do I need an f4 or do I need an f7.1 or do I need an f11? So your depth of field preview button is where you can actually determine exactly which f-stop I need to photograph this macro subject. Questions on depth of field preview button? No, it's a thing that we should be using more. Yes.
I'm still looking for mine.
It should be
I'm gonna have
right.
to go back to the manual.
Yeah, it should be one of those buttons right in the front. Yeah.
I found a button in the front, but it didn't go dark. That's
It did.
it's testing. I'll go back to the manual.
Well, also, if your aperture's open, then it's not going to go dark. It
Oh.
would only go dark if you're at 22 or 32.
Oh, okay. I'll try that again.
Okay. Okay. Is it there, Ed?
Yeah, it's on,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the R5.
Yeah, it's right there in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, they made it round now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
And-
it's a handy little gadget, especially when we're doing this macro stuff. Yeah. Handy little thing to have. Okay. So focus stacking. Oh, and by the way, depth of field preview button. This is another thing that it's useful for. Depth of field, area and focus is 1/3 forwards and 2/3 backwards. So when we're focusing really, really close on a small subject, we might need to focus closer instead of in the middle. And that's where depth of field preview button comes in really handy too. So if we're going to focus 1/3 of the way in on the subject and then use an F8, maybe that's what we need versus focusing halfway in on the subject and using an F8. So it's a good little gadget to use. Try it on your next homework assignment, see how it goes. Okay, so focus stacking. Have you tried focus stacking?
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
Ed, you've tried. Wade, and you haven't tried? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So focus stacking, this is what happens in focus stacking. So this is a SOTOL. Those of you that have been out in the desert know SOTOLs. And what I have done is I have focused all the way around in various places throughout the interior of the SOTOL, cactus growing in a big clump. And then here is all of the pictures. And you see where I'm focusing in all the different pictures. You see that? So I'm just focusing in various areas, and then I just turned them into a little movie. And then when I put them all together into a focus stack, it's the last one. So it's the last picture in this series. There you go. I'm not showing it to you finally. So a focus stack is where we focus in various places throughout the photograph, throughout the subject, and then we stack them together. And I've given you the instructions for stacking them together in either Lightroom or Photoshop, whichever one you happen to be using, Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. So this peacock feather is at an angle to me, and my focus point is kind of right about there. So in the next photograph, I'm going to start down here and I'm going to focus here and take a picture. And I'm going to focus here and take a picture, focus here and take a picture, focus here, focus here, focus here, focus here, and focus here. And then I'm going to stack them all together.
Kathy, are you using spot focus to do that?
Yeah, you have to use an individual focus point, because otherwise the camera is focusing where it wants to.
Right.
And on
okay.
most of the time on macro, we're gonna determine where we need to focus. And by the way, all of you all using the mirrorless cameras and even the digital SLR cameras, then you have to be on autofocus when we start doing stacks in the camera. So when I start talking about doing a stack once we get into auto stacking, then make sure that your camera is on autofocus, because it won't stack unless you're on autofocus. So I have gone from this photograph at a good old solid F8 to now focusing on every single aspect, going all the way through. And now I get all of the focus. So you see that you really can't tell that I've stacked it, but I'm getting everything all the way through. Ed, she's really loving on you.
She's licking my ear.
I remember you telling me that she likes to lick your hair.
Yes,
clean
she
your ears
does.
out. Yeah.
She was whining, wanting to get in my lap.
So a blend. Yeah, Wayne.
Okay, now, when you're doing the focus, do you just change the focus point of the camera, or you're not moving the camera? are
Don't
you?
move the camera, because it won't
Okay,
work
you
if you
just-
move the camera.
Okay, that's.
Okay, yeah, this is important. So this is a Bouvardia out in Big Bend National Park. It's one of my favorite wildflowers once we get out to Big Bend National Park in the spring, but it grows in a cluster. So it's nearly impossible to get the entire blooms or the cluster of blooms in focus because of just the odd way it grows. They just go in every different direction. So then when we got focus stacking, I thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect. So this is a blend of 6 images. But here's the first picture, and this is just blown up so you can see what it looks like. So I can see all the little hairs, but you see I've got a little bit of a flaw right here. So if you blow it up real, real big, you can see that there's a little bit of a flaw right here. And there's also a little bit of a flaw right over in here. But this is what it looks like if I blow that picture all the way up. But then here's the first picture, and I'm focused, I suspect, right over in here. And then here's the second picture, and who knows where I focused, maybe back here. And then here's the third picture, and I'm focused back here or back here, because these are the ones that are in focus. And then here's the fourth picture, and I'm seeing some more detail in the hairy things. So I'm focused back in here somewhere. So I'm actually choosing where I focus. And this, by the way, would be super easy with the mirrorless cameras because cameras on the tripod. And for each picture, I could just touch the back of the screen and choose my focus points. Instead of moving the focus points around, I could just touch the back of the camera. Or on Ed's app, you could touch the back of the camera on the phone app also. And then here's another photo. And once again, I'm focused kind of back into here, it looks like, over in here. So I've just moved my focus point around to each one of the blooms on this one. And then here's the last one at F22. So I did change my f-stop on the last one. So this gives me a little bit more depth of field at F22. It looks like I'm focused maybe right in here somewhere. And then once again, when I blend them all together, I'll take you back to the very beginning. That's what I get when I blend them all together. So it's focus stacking. And when you use the instructions that I've given you at the top of lesson 2, in Bridge or Lightroom, you're going to highlight all the images. And then you're going to go up to the top and you're going to click Tools, Photoshop, Load Images into Photoshop Layers. In Lightroom, you're going to highlight all the images, and then you're going to go up to the top and you're going to go Edit in, or Photo Edit in Photoshop, Load into Photoshop Layers. And so then when you edit Auto Align, you're going to go into Photoshop and you're going to go into Edit, Auto Align, and then you're going to go to Edit, Blend. So it's a really simple process. Very, very simple process. And Photoshop does all the work for you. And it just looks for all of the clear areas and gets rid of them. So going back to my next example, this is a very tiny metal mark, once again, out in the desert. It is about 1 inch across and very, very tiny and shallow depth of field. So I just moved a focus point to the wing, 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 focus point to the head, focus point to the tip of the abdomen. And then when I blended it all together, even though I'm staying flat to the film plane, its wings are slightly out of the plane. And then when I blended it, now it looks pretty darn good. And then there's a little bit of a flaw back here, and I left that for you. Now this is handheld because it was like 110 degrees and I didn't want to walk across the parking lot to get my tripod and set the tripod up and all that other stuff. So if I had been on a tripod, this would be a heck of a lot clearer than what it actually is. So you can do this when you're just standing around out in the field without a tripod. And then this is a blend of 2 images, and you might have some photos like this in your collections. So the first image was this one, and the body is in focus, but the wings out of focus. Second picture out of my catalog, wings in focus, but body's out of focus. So then I just took these old two photos and blended them together. And now the body's in focus and the wings in focus. So you might have some of these from your collections that just didn't work, where you were just standing still and you moved the focus point around slightly. Now, the good thing about the modern software with the Adobe products is that whether you are slightly out of a line, so in this case, I'm hand holding, it will line this up. That's the auto align. So you might move ever so slightly doing this out in the field, but it will take that into account now with your software. So here's another one down in Costa Rica with a coroneted tree frog. And this is a blend of several layers. So once again, I'm holding the camera. Wayne and Ed have done these with me in Costa Rica. We were moving around. We're allowing everybody else to get in and photograph the frog that we've got. And so we don't get a lot of time to get everything right. So this is get in there and fire several shots. And then unfortunately holding the lens, holding a big lens, and then firing pretty fast. I ended up getting this eye in focus in one picture and this eye in focus in one picture and that type of stuff. So go ahead and align them, auto align them, and then auto blend them. And now I get my in focus tree frog. So remember, we can take old photographs that we took and we can do this and breathe new life into them. Same thing here. Frog was kind of moving. I was moving. So I've got one where this eye's in focus, one where this eye's in focus, one where it's a little bit more in focus here. Take them all, blend them together, use that auto align, auto blend. The auto align lines it up. The auto blend blends it. Same thing here, little day flower. These are blooming right now. This is a neat flower to play with. It's small and it's really three-dimensional. So starting here in the beginning, focus here, focus here, focus here, focus here, focus here, focus here, focus here. And why I didn't continue going all the way, I have no idea. I just gave up. So one of these days I need to go pick another one of these. They're in the backyard, bring it inside, put it in a vase, and do the whole thing all over again. But now, with all the Z and the R cameras, we can do focus stacking in camera. So it's called auto bracketing when we're in our Canon cameras. And Catherine, in your Z, I'm not sure what it's called. Is it focus stacking?
I have a note to myself to go look in my manual.
Okay.
Because I haven't, I remember in the basic, he said to read your manual front to cover. Well, this manual is a little bit longer than my other manual.
Yes, exactly.
But I took that to heart. And so
Yeah.
I haven't quite gotten to it. So I know there's auto bracketing, but I haven't looked for that. But I have a note to myself to find out what it's called and,
Yeah.
and
Now,
where some of these things are.
Now, auto bracketing is where it takes light to dark or dark to light.
Right.
Canon maddeningly calls this focus bracketing, even though it's focus stacking. So we've got to see what Nikon calls it. And if you can't find
I'll
it,
look for it and I'll report back.
okay, good. Thank you very much. That'll keep my knowledge going.
There you go.
But now what we can do is we can set our focus bracketing in the back of the camera. We can tell it how many pictures we want it to take, 5, 10. We can tell it how far we want it to bracket. So for a landscape photograph, we might tell it to bracket 15 or 20 feet and take 20 pictures if we were going to bracket a landscape. But for something like this small skipper, we might tell it to bracket, you know, a couple of fractions of an inch and take 10 pictures. The reality is, I have found that if you ask it to bracket too far away and take too many pictures, then you're really wasting. Ed, do you remember what you tried last time you did this?
Oh, I do this a lot. In fact,
Yeah.
I did it yesterday. 'Cause I
Okay.
had bromeliad blooming.
Yeah,
I'm taking 7 pictures, and then I use the R5 and I set it on small raw,
yeah,
because the big ones, and I just got a new computer, so I can really edit a whole lot faster. But
Yeah.
even at that, and so I like I say I do this a lot because I like to take pictures of flowers. And
Do you
like I said, I
remember
did it
your-
yesterday?
do you remember your width? 7 flowers? And do
No,
you
in fact,
remember
I
what
was
your-
looking at it,
Okay.
and because I use it so much that I'm in my customized menu, I have it.
Yeah,
So I don't have to look for it. So I can find it, but
okay,
so I can enable it because the focus increment, it doesn't really tell you, it's the default is 3 units from 1 to 10. And I haven't played with what happens when I change those units.
yeah, because I've changed it, and I like it not super, super small, but not super, super big either. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
In the middle?
it's kind of like 2 notches over or something like that.
Yeah, mine is like 3 over.
3 notches over. Okay, so that's pretty scientific. Yeah, whatever that one turns out to be. But
Yeah.
this is this type of skipper, this long-tailed skipper, he's holding his wings up and his other wings are going flat. So this is a real 3-dimensional tiny butterfly. But this is a focus bracket of 10 different images, starting, by the way, at the tip of the top wing. Now, this is something that I have learned. So with your flowers or with your butterflies, start with the thing that's closest to you, and then it's going to move down. And by the way, with the R cameras, and I assume this is going to be the same thing with the Z cameras, if I set it for 10 pictures, I don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I click once and it takes 10 pictures. So at first I was trying to push the button down 10 times, and no, you just push one and you'll notice the number of pictures clocking down through the viewfinder. And then it does have to be on autofocus, and you're doing one focus point, and then I'm choosing the thing that is closest to the camera. If you don't choose the thing that's closest to the camera, this is a good example of it. This little wing right here facing right toward the camera is out of focus. But you know, the rest of the body is in focus. And look at the detail on those hairs on the back of that butterfly shining in the sun. I mean, that's just incredible detail. And then luckily not getting too much going on toward the background either. And so this is once again at an F8 starting point. And then here's another one. And then just, you know, the Gulf fritillary is pretty flat to the camera anyway, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem. But when you're working at higher magnifications, then we want to make sure that we get everything in focus. Once again, I did not start with the wing closest to the camera. So this little wing right here that turns out to be the closest point to the camera, I ended up getting it out of focus. So learn from my mistakes and start with the point that is closest to the camera. But you see the proboscis right in here. We got great detail. Catherine?
What's running through my mind is because I know that these butterflies and these things don't stand still and pose.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm just trying to picture in my mind how quickly I've got to think and move to do this.
Well, what I end up doing, butterflies, when you work on them, especially in the heat of the day, they're a little bit, they've already got their feeding done, and you know, they're so every once in a while they'll kind of sit and stay. And you know, when they sit and stay, that's when you just fire away. But if I'm doing this in the butterfly garden, then in the flower garden, then I'm just going to leave the camera set. So unfortunately, every photograph I end up taking is going to have 7 parts. So watch out for this, because I probably don't need to take 5 different pictures of this butterfly, because that would mean I've got 5 times 7 photographs. And as Ed said, this now gets to be a lot of photographs. So all these pieces.
And so, and you're setting it on a tripod?
No,
Nope.
no, nah,
Okay.
not for butterflies. If I were doing, some flowers, I might, maybe if I were being really exact, but this was done during the heat of last summer. And so, no, I don't need a tripod. They're staying pretty still.
Okay.
Yeah. Some other stuff I might. So this is a focus stack inside. Now this would be a tripod versus outside with the butterflies, but just a freesia, and it's got a pretty 3-dimensional structure to it as a flower. So I'm going to bring it inside or somewhere at least where it's out of the wind, and then use an artificial background. This artificial background, by the way, is just a blurry photograph. And then I printed it on my printer, as I showed you all last week. So it's just an artificial background with a little bit of greenish in it, and then focusing all the way through it and then stacking it. So we get all the structure inside, all the different petals, that type of stuff. And then here's another example of this. I showed this to you all earlier. This is a snowflake, and this is also done, even though it's very flat, it's done as a focus stack. And then there was a lot of cleanup. Yeah. This is another thing that I've started working on. These are the catkins and the early spring structure of the trees in my yard, and some of the common trees in this area. And this is a focus stack because, a branch of a tree has got all different kinds of levels to it. So focus going from the closest thing to me all the way back, and then using an F8 basic window light. Same thing on another spring branch. So these focus stacks are really neat. This is that same freesia that I showed you just a bit ago, but I blurred one of the layers inside. So just to add that little bit of kind of haziness, one of the layers is blurred. So in your layer stack, you can just take one of those layers, go up to filter, blur, and go to any of your blurs, and you can blur just one of the pictures. And then when you align them, then that's what, or after you've aligned them, after you've aligned them and blended them, but before you flattened them, you can go in and blur one of your layers if you want to add kind of a haziness to it. Something to play with. So this is in-camera stacking using the Olympus camera. So when I had the Olympus camera, we were working on some gems and minerals. And this is setting your focus point. See how close it is right up in here. So setting the focus point right to maybe right there. And then clicking the Olympus camera, and it ran all the way through to, I think it was 10 pictures. So this internal focus, this ability to take the pictures and blend them all the way through, it's pretty cool for macro objects. Olympus, maybe Nikon, Catherine, but Sony will blend a focus stack in the camera and give you a JPEG. But you have to tell the camera to keep the pieces because you might want to blend the pieces later. If you tell the camera, don't keep the pieces, it throws them away. And then here's what happens with the Olympus when I was testing the Olympus on one of my day flowers. And this is in camera focus stacking, and this is what it spit out. So it took away all my pieces and it blended it inside the camera, which isn't bad at all. Little bit of a flaw right there, if you all can see it. But still, in the same time, for somebody that maybe doesn't have the computer power or doesn't want to sit and blend all these later on, in camera focus stacking does a pretty good job. And then you can remember that for this real tight stuff, not the focus stacking because the camera's moving itself, but for aligning, for getting everything where you need it to be, this focus rail works really well. Did anybody buy it over the last week?
Yeah, I got one.
Did you buy it? Have you
Can
used
you
it?
buy, huh?
Did you use it?
No, but I want to use it this afternoon because I had a dinner Sunday night and I picked a whole bunch of flowers from the yard and they're still looking good. So I want to take some really extreme close-ups. Can you buy an Arc Swiss adapter for that top instead of having?
It, yes, but there's a hole on the bottom of my Arca Swiss.
There is?
On the bottom of mine. That's the base plate we're talking about on the bottom of the camera. Do you have a hole?
Yeah, I do, but I didn't think it was threaded. Yeah, because I have some,
Okay.
I have to look.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
'cause-
I guess I didn't realize it was threaded.
Yeah.
Because I tried it once and it was a nuisance to take the Arc Swiss off and then put this thing on.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, I'll have to check.
Okay.
Anyway,
So
well, you answered
mine-
my question.
Mine's threaded. So
Yeah,
the,
okay.
the Arca Swiss is the base plate on the bottom of our cameras, and it's an Arca Swiss style base plate, which is the gold standard of base plates, because they and mine are made by Really Right Stuff or Wimberley, because once you Allen wrench them onto the bottom of your camera, they pretty much stay there forever until you take them off, and they don't move around, they don't slip. So that's what we're talking about. So yeah, it should be able just to screw right on the top of their head.
Yeah, well, I'm using the plate that comes with the PD strap.
Oh,
and
with
it
the,
doesn't-
okay.
And it
Okay.
doesn't have, it's an Arc Swiss, but it doesn't have the screw, but I do have some of the other Arc Swisses I could
Yeah.
just switch.
Yeah, switch them all. Yeah. Any questions about this one? No, once again, it's for like really tight stuff. But boy, it's what you need if you're working on really small stuff. Just makes that focusing it makes moving the camera around a lot easier if you're only going to move a fraction of an inch at a time. And once again, it's not very expensive gadget. Okay, so one of the things that you are going to work on in your homework assignment is playing around with water drops on glass. This works when you focus stack, because these bubbles of water are three-dimensional. They've got depth to them. So your glass is flat and we're going to spray it with Rain-X. So you're going to have to go buy some Rain-X, and you're going to spray it with Rain-X, clean it off real good. And then when you squirt it with water, the Rain-X is going to make the water form little balls. And remember that those are three-dimensional. So to get the image through the drops of water, you're going to end up having to do, in my opinion, a focus stack. Because if you don't do a focus stack, the top of the water drop is out of focus. And maybe the glass where the water is adhered to is in focus, but everything in between is out of focus. So you don't get a really clear picture of the image through the water drop. So you are going to take a piece of glass. And if you don't have a piece of glass, then remember that you've got picture frames probably all over the house, and you might have some that are unused. So you're going to take that piece of glass out and you're going to clean it really good, spray it with Rain-X, let it dry, and then you're going to squirt it with a squirt bottle. The finer, the better. Those are going to form nice little drops. And then you're going to suspend that piece of glass between two things. So I like using chairs with cans on the side to hold the glass. And then underneath the glass, you're going to put a colored background. And if you want to get flowers through your drops, you're going to put some flowers down there. You only need one flower, by the way. You don't need a lot of flowers. And then you're going to have to figure out where the focus point is inside your water drop, because your camera is now looking straight down on a tripod at this glass. And this is where you have to use that depth of field preview button to figure out exactly where your focus is. So what f-stop you're going to use, how you're going to use it, this becomes the challenge of this assignment. So everybody have the setup in mind? So you can use.
How far should the object be under the piece of glass?
That's why I like using a chair, because chair height is usually okay.
But then you're saying I have two cans with
That
a
are
piece of
holding
glass.
the glass on the chair.
Okay, so like soup cans
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're just putting some weight on the glass.
Okay,
Yeah. And then
Oh.
on the floor, you've got a background color. And
I
then
guess
on the floor, you've got a flower.
okay, I guess I'm confused.
Go ahead.
So you've got this piece of glass on the chair. Is the object on the seat of the chair?
No.
And-
Suspended between two chairs.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah, sorry. So it's
Okay.
suspended between two chairs. So we got space between the two chairs. The soup cans are just holding the glass in place.
Okay,
So that you don't bang it or anything. And then the camera is on tripod looking straight down. And remember that flat to the film plane? You've got to
Okay.
get the camera absolutely parallel to your piece of glass
okay,
so that we don't get any fall off in depth of field on the glass.
okay.
So
That makes
it's a,
sense now.
go ahead, ask questions.
I think I figured it out.
Okay.
We'll see.
And it might be that you've got, sawhorses or something like that. You could use, for me, chairs work well. Yeah. And then, whatever your object is, a big flower, by the way, works better than a little flower. So get yourself a Gerber daisy or, something like that. Get yourself a big flower. It works better. Grocery store. So you got to get Rain-X, piece of glass, some sort of background. And remember, you can just take a picture and blur it and then print that out. And that gives you a background. You can use a piece of cloth if you want to. You can use, Wayne, you've got your rug you were using. So, whatever background you want to use. And then this leads to your water drops. So on almost every plant flower in the world, there are these things called micropopaea. And they determine how water drains off of that leaf or that flower. So every leaf and every flower drains in a certain way. And this one, for instance, is a dandelion from up north, and it has these little beautiful hairs, one of those goat head from up north. And it has these beautiful hairs on it that catch the water and make these water form into really nice balls. But then here's lotus blooms in the flower market in Thailand. And you notice how the water has accumulated on that structure. So it always does that. That's the way that the flower is made. So this beautiful microstructure in flowers and leaves gives us this way that these water drops accumulate. And I see this now in the lotus that we have blooming in some of the marshes right now, where you get these really, really nice water drops in them. On the canna lilies down in Costa Rica. So, it just forms this real nice little regular structure of the water drop. So if you know this about certain flowers that you're photographing, or if you observe it in certain flowers that you're photographing, if a calla lily drains like this today, it's going to drain like this tomorrow. And that little spiral that it's got on its tip, it's going to drain like this every single time. And so once you learn that about certain flowers and leaves, then this means it's much, much easier for us to get that beautiful water drop coming off of those. So now you know about flat to the film plane. Now you know about getting as close as you can, and then focusing inside the water drop if you want the object that's inside the water drop. So you're going to try your hand at focus stacking. Photograph the same subject, but focus in different places on each shot. 6 or 7 photographs is suggested. And then you're going to present the finished image to class. If you want to send me the pieces, you're more than welcome to send me the pieces. And then you're going to spray that piece of glass with Rain-X or other water beading product. Place flowers. You can also place M&Ms or other colorful objects behind the glass, underneath the glass. Focus on the bead of water and take that photo. And then I also want you to go looking around in the yard, the garden, the marsh, wherever you want to go. Photograph a bead of water on a flower or a leaf. And I want you to illustrate how that water or how that water drains on that flower or that leaf. If you need to, go spray, and see how they drain. If you need to, when you turn your sprinkler on tonight, which you might turn your sprinkler on, then afterwards watch, how everything drains off. And then can you capture an interesting reflection in the bead of water? So that's the fun thing of that. And I want to show you what students did in other classes. So here's one. And this is wrapping paper. Okay, so it wasn't my flower. This is wrapping paper. Wrapping paper. So interesting, isn't it? And this was using an eyedropper to put the beads of water in a shape. So instead of my universal squirt, they took an eyedropper, and by the way, this has to be a very fine tipped eyedropper, and they put the beads, the water in a shape. Creative, isn't it? Here's another one. Here's another one. So it almost looks like beach balls, doesn't it? Yeah. And this student said that when they sprayed the glass with the Rain-X, they used a skewer to move the balls closer to each other so they would clump together and form bigger drops of water. So they actually ended up moving the balls of water around with a skewer. Fun. And then here's another one, and this is a fan, one of those fans. But I love the shape and I love the pattern. And then I love that the balls of water, we can see the top of the fan right here and the middle of the fan right here. And as we move down, we see different parts of the fan. So I just love this picture. I think it's really neat. Okay, so you can break out of the box. It does not have to be my little flower on a background, because I think it's really interesting once you start looking at all the different stuff that you can do with this one. Okay. So does that give you some ideas?
Yep.
Yeah, good, good, good. Okay, questions on your homework?
You mentioned adding glycerin to the water. Is that anything that would, where do you get the glycerin anyway?
You get glycerin at the pharmacy. And when I have bought it, I have had to ask the pharmacist for it. Apparently you use glycerin after you've had your plastic surgery so that you don't have any scars. But I didn't know that. and I think it's a laxative. I'm not positive. Don't quote me on that. Don't ingest the stuff until, but I couldn't find it. And I asked the pharmacist and he ordered me a bottle of it. And I've had that bottle now for 8 or 10 years.
They have it at CVS, at least down here they do.
And it's in the pharmacy department, obviously, right?
No, it's, I had to ask where it was because I looked everywhere for it. But it's in the hand lotion area.
Ah, okay.
because it was average, and I used to make glycerin when I was working for Dow Chemical.
Yeah.
I produced glycerin.
Okay.
They're one of the products I made, and it's a USDA. One of our engineers used glycerin to sweeten his coffee every day. You can drink it, you can eat it. It's not toxic.
Okay.
It's in a lot of food products.
Okay.
The
Okay.
rabbi blessed our plant every year, so it's kosher glycerin.
So it's kosher even. Wow.
Yeah, but
Wow.
anyway, Walgreens didn't have it, but CVS did. But I had to
Okay.
ask, where the heck is the glycerin? Sure enough, they had it.
Okay. Okay. And that's right, because the people who make their own soap and make their own hand lotions use glycerin. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
Okay. Okay. So what the glycerin does, Wayne, is it just makes the balls of water stay put better. So
Okay.
especially when you're dripping the water off of a flower and you want that water drop to stay there for a little bit longer, glycerin helps in that respect.
Okay.
So for post-processing, do you prefer Lightroom over Photoshop or Photoshop over Lightroom for the stacking?
It doesn't matter. They're both made by
Okay.
the same company. They both do exactly the same thing.
Okay,
It's just, they have just maintained for all of us from the old days, the bridge Adobe Camera Raw to go into Photoshop. And for the, newer folks, they developed Lightroom and they do exactly the same thing.
okay,
Yeah. Your processing is happening for the focus stack. Your processing is happening over in Photoshop.
okay.
Okay. Any questions?
No,
Got your homework assignment, right?
got a
Mm.
lot to do.
Lot to do, lot fun. It's
Yeah.
a lot fun. Do it inside because it's hot outside. Okay. But but those butterflies are flying like crazy because it is so hot outside. So if you have to do some focus stacking, do it on butterflies outside.
All right.
Okay. I will see you all next week. I'm going to stop sharing for right now. I can't wait to see your homework and see what everything looks like, and see what you all discover and see what you all present. Okay.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thanks.
Okay. Good
Thanks.
night or goodbye to the
Bye.
See you later.
See you later. Exactly. Okay.